The testing arena was a massive circular room filled with hollow technology that could create any environment in seconds. Teo stood in the center, his armor gleaming under the bright lights of Station Nexus. He was a young warrior from the Kalian Empire, a species known for their natural strength and combat abilities. For 3 years, he had trained at the Stellar Academy, one of the most difficult military schools in the entire galaxy. Today was special. Today he would face his next challenge, and Teo had no doubt he would win. The training instructor's voice came through his comm system. "Your opponent is ready, Trainee Teo. Begin when you are prepared." Teo nodded. He could see his opponent now stepping into the arena from the opposite side. She was smaller than him, with dark hair tied back and a thin build. She wore simple armor, nothing fancy or impressive. Teo's first thought was that this would be easy. This opponent looked weak compared to him. The woman's name appeared on his display, Da Min. Her origin showed as Earth. Teo had never fought against an Earthling before. Earth was a planet so far away and so insignificant that most warriors did not even think about it. Teo had heard that humans were small, fragile creatures who could not survive in space without machines. This woman must be no different. "Ready?" the instructor asked. "Ready," Teo confirmed. The instructor gave the signal to begin, and Teo immediately activated his scanner bolt weapon. This tool was designed to shoot a burst of energy that would examine an opponent's biology and physical state. It was fast, accurate, and difficult to avoid. Teo had been using it since his first year at the academy. He fired with confidence, aiming straight at the center of Damin's body. Time seemed to slow down. The bolt traveled through the air, a streak of blue energy moving at incredible speed. But Damin moved faster. She did not jump to the side like Teo expected. She did not dive or roll or use any defensive shield. Instead, her arm rose smoothly, and her hand opened like a flower blooming. The scanner bolt flew directly into her palm. The energy crackled against her skin for just a moment, and then it stopped. It simply vanished, like it had been nothing at all. Damin stood there, completely calm, holding the remains of his attack in her hand. The energy faded away to nothing, disappearing like morning fog. Teo's heart skipped a beat. He had never seen anything like this before. Damin opened her hand, and the last few sparks of the scanner bolt fell away. She looked at Teo with eyes that were intelligent and powerful, eyes that had seen far more than a young trainee from the Kalian Empire could imagine. Then she smiled, just slightly, and spoke words that would change everything for him. "Earthborn," she said, her voice clear and calm. "Try again." Teo's confidence fell away like water draining from a cup. Something was very, very wrong here. His hands felt cold despite the warm air of the testing arena. The scanner bolt, the one he had been certain would work, had been caught. Not blocked or deflected, but actually caught in her bare hand. A weapon designed to move faster than most creatures could track had been grabbed from the air like it was nothing. "End simulation," the instructor's voice called out. The holographic arena disappeared, and the walls became solid again. Teo found himself standing in a blank gray room with Damin, who was looking at him with an expression of patient understanding. She had not even put any effort into catching that bolt. It had been easy for her. That was perhaps the most frightening part of all. "That was unexpected," Teo said, trying to keep his voice steady. "That was the whole point," Damin replied. She walked toward him slowly, and he fought the urge to step backward. "You came in here assuming you knew everything about this fight. You assumed I was weak because I looked different from you. You assumed your weapons would work because you have used them successfully thousands of times before. But assumptions are dangerous in combat. Assumptions get you killed," Before Teo could respond, the door to the testing arena opened. Instructor Mi-sun walked in, her expression serious and unreadable. She was a tall woman of middle years, with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. She had been Teo's main instructor for the past year, and he had come to respect her deeply. "Trainee Teo," Mi-sun said formally, "you performed poorly in that simulation." "Yes, instructor," Teo replied, keeping his eyes forward. "You will be assigned additional training sessions," Mi-sun continued. "You will work with Da-min 3 times per week, starting tomorrow morning. You are dismissed." Teo turned to leave, but Mi-sun's voice stopped him. "One more thing," she said. "Do not make assumptions about your opponent's abilities based on their appearance. That mistake nearly cost you your life in this simulation. In a real combat situation, such a mistake would cost you everything." Teo nodded and left the arena, his mind spinning. Additional training sessions with Da-min. The woman who had caught his attack like it was a child's toy. The woman from Earth, a planet he had never truly considered important. The woman who had spoken those 5 words that had destroyed his entire understanding of how the world worked. Earthborn. Try again. As he walked through the corridors of Station Nexus back to his quarters, Teo began to realize that something significant had happened. He had failed, yes, but more importantly, he had been shown that there were things in this galaxy that he did not understand. And somehow, he knew that understanding these things would change him forever. The Stellar Academy suddenly felt much larger than it had before. The next morning, Teo arrived at the training chamber feeling nervous and uncertain. He had not slept well during the night, thinking about the moment when Da-min caught his scanner bolt. His mind kept replaying the scene over and over. How was it possible for a human, supposedly a weak species from a distant planet, to move so fast? How could she catch energy itself with bare hands? Da-min was already there, waiting for him. She stood near a large screen that showed different fight patterns and techniques. Her expression was friendly but serious. She gestured for Teo to come and stand beside her. "I want to show you something," Da-min said. She pressed a button on the screen, and an image appeared. It showed a human in a strange metal suit, floating in the darkness of space. "Do you know what this is?" "A machine suit," Teo answered, "for protection in space." "Yes," Da-min said, "but look at the date. This was taken 200 years ago. Humans created this technology with no help from anyone. We did this ourselves with only our minds and our hands. We had no natural abilities to survive in space. We were fragile creatures on a small planet, but we wanted to explore, so we built machines to help us." She pressed the button again, and a new image appeared. This time it showed a human doing a complicated movement underwater, twisting and turning with incredible grace. "This is a human training in water environments. Humans learned to navigate in zero gravity by studying how they moved in the oceans of our home world. When told we could not do something, we found another way." Teo watched as more images appeared on the screen. Humans climbing mountains. Humans learning languages they had never heard before. Humans solving problems that scientists said were unsolvable. Humans surviving in conditions that should have killed them. Each image told a story of humans refusing to accept limits. "Your species is born strong," Da-min explained. "You do not need to learn to be powerful. But humans are born weak. We must learn everything. This means when we encounter something new, we do not assume it is impossible. We just assume it is something we have not learned yet." Da-min turned off the screen and looked directly at Teo. "That is why I caught your scanner bolt. I had studied your weapon before. I had seen humans before who used similar technology. I had trained my body to move faster than the bolt travels. It was not magic. It was not a special gift from my planet. It was preparation and learning." Over the next hours, Da-min explained the truth about Earth and humans. The information was shocking to Teo. He learned that the reports he had read about humans in the Academy's database were incomplete. The real stories of human achievement were hidden or downplayed. A human woman had piloted a damaged spacecraft across the empty space between stars when everyone said it was impossible. A human man had survived alone on a hostile moon for 6 months by learning to use tools made from rocks and ice. A human had even learned the difficult communication system of an alien species in just 3 weeks. "Why are these stories hidden?" Teo asked. Damin's expression became more serious. "Because they are frightening to those in power. For thousands of years, the Galactic Councils have believed that strength comes from what you are born with. They believed that strong species should rule and weak species should follow. This kept order. This made sense in their minds. But humans changed this idea completely. Humans are weak when born, but we become strong through learning and will. This means any human can become powerful if given time and opportunity. This idea threatens everything the councils believe in." Teo felt a chill run down his spine. "You are saying the councils are hiding the truth about humans because they fear you?" "Not fear us," Damin corrected. "Fear what we represent. The idea that strength is not fixed. The idea that determination and learning matter more than natural power. If this idea spreads, it could change the entire structure of galactic society." The training session ended, and Teo walked back through the corridors of Station Nexus with his mind full of questions. He passed Instructor Mi-sun in a hallway, and she stopped him briefly. "You are beginning to understand," she said quietly. "Good. Keep learning." Before Teo could ask what she meant, she continued walking. But her words stayed with him. She had known about this. She had known what Damin was teaching him. She had known that the information in the Academy's database was incomplete. That evening, Teo sat in the station's observation deck, looking out at the stars. Station Nexus floated in the darkness, a small island of light in an infinite ocean. Somewhere out there was Earth, a planet so far away that light from its sun took years to reach the Academy. A planet where humans had grown from nothing to become something powerful enough to frighten the Galactic Councils. Teo realized that his first combat simulation had not really been a test of his fighting ability. It had been a test of his willingness to accept that everything he thought he knew might be wrong. And now that test continued, because the more he learned about humans, the more he understood that the world was far more complicated than the simple lessons taught in the Academy. He thought about Damin's words. Earthborn. Try again. It was not an insult or a simple challenge to fight better. It was an invitation to think differently, to stop assuming, to start learning. The stars seemed to shine brighter now. And Teo wondered what other surprises the galaxy held that he had never imagined. 3 weeks passed, and Teo's training with Damin became the most important part of his day at the Academy. Every session challenged something he believed to be true. Damin was not teaching him new fighting techniques or weapons. Instead, she was teaching him how to think differently about strength and power. One morning, Damin brought him to a quiet room filled with recording screens. She activated a video showing a human running across a desert with nothing to drink for days. The human should have died from thirst and heat. But the human had survived by understanding the patterns of the desert and finding hidden water sources that only experienced explorers knew about. This human had no special powers, Damin explained. She had no heat resistance genes or the ability to see through sand. She had only knowledge and determination. When her body screamed at her to stop, her mind kept pushing. That is what humans have that your species sometimes lacks. We do not accept the first answer. We keep trying. Teo found himself thinking about his own training. He had always been told that Kalian warriors were strong because they were born strong. His natural speed and strength came from his genes. But what had he done to improve beyond what nature had given him? Very little. He had simply relied on being better than others at birth. During one of their sessions, a young trainee named Ji-Wan approached Tayo in the academy corridors. Ji-Wan was also from the Kalian Empire, and they had been friends since their first year. "What are you doing spending so much time with that human?" Ji-Wan asked, his tone suspicious. "The senior warriors are saying that she is here to spy on us, that Earth sent her to learn our secrets." "That is not true," Tayo replied. "She is teaching me something important about how to think." "Think? We do not need to learn how to think," Ji-Wan scoffed. "We are warriors. We need to learn how to fight and kill our enemies. What can a weak human teach us about that?" Tayo found himself without a good answer in that moment, but he remembered Damin's lesson about assumptions. He decided to invite Ji-Wan to their next training session and let him see for himself. During the session, Damin did something different. Instead of teaching, she asked both Tayo and Ji-Wan to fight against each other in a simple combat match. The match lasted only 30 seconds. Ji-Wan charged forward with strength and speed, attacking aggressively. Tayo did not meet his force head-on. Instead, he moved aside slightly and used Ji-Wan's own momentum to throw him to the ground. Ji-Wan stood up quickly, surprised and angry. He charged again, but this time, Tayo moved even more smoothly, guiding Ji-Wan's strength where he wanted it to go instead of fighting against it. After 3 more attempts, Ji-Wan was tired and frustrated. "What are you doing?" Ji-Wan demanded. "Why are you not fighting me directly?" "Because fighting you directly is not the best way to win," Tayo answered. "Damin taught me that sometimes understanding your opponent's strength is more valuable than just having more strength yourself." Damin stepped forward and explained the technique to both of them. She showed how any strong fighter could be defeated by someone who understood how force and movement worked together. Size and strength did not matter if your opponent knew how to use them against you. Ji-Wan's expression changed. For the first time, he seemed to understand what Tayo had been learning. He asked Damin if she would teach him as well. She agreed. As the weeks continued, Tayo's understanding of the academy began to change. He noticed that instructor Misun seemed to be watching human and alien trainees interact more carefully. He saw her making notes when humans and Kalians worked together in group training. One day, he encountered a human scientist named Hai-Sol in the Academy's research center. They began talking, and Hai-Sol explained that she was studying xenobiology, the science of alien life forms. "I have noticed something interesting in my research," Hai-Sol told him. "The Galactic Councils publish reports about human capabilities, but the real data in their private files is very different. The real data shows that humans have adapted to space travel faster than any other species in recorded history. We have learned alien languages in months instead of years. We have survived environments that would kill most species, but the councils keep this information hidden." "Why would they do that?" Tayo asked. "Because power is built on hierarchy," Hai-Sol answered. "The councils need other species to believe they are inherently weaker, inherently inferior. If humans can grow as strong as ancient species without being born powerful, then the entire system becomes unstable. The councils cannot control a species that refuses to accept limitations." These conversations with Hai-Sol added another layer to what Tayo was learning from Damin. The universe was not as simple as the Academy had taught him. The Galactic Councils were not just governing. They were controlling. They were managing information. They were shaping what different species believed about themselves and others. One evening, Tayo found himself sitting alone in the observation deck again, watching the stars. He thought about his first combat simulation when he had fired his scanner bolt with such confidence, that Tayo had believed in a clear order to the universe. Strong beings ruled. Weak beings obeyed. Success came from the power you were born with, but that Tayo was gone now. In his place was someone new, someone who understood that the universe was far more complex, someone who had learned that the greatest strength was not in your body or your weapons, but in your willingness to learn and adapt. The training with Da Min was not just making him a better fighter, it was making him a different person. And Taio was not entirely sure if the older warriors would appreciate what he was becoming. He watched the distant stars and waited to see what would come next. The challenge came suddenly, without warning. One morning, an announcement spread through the academy that Commander Rohan, one of the most senior and respected instructors, had demanded a special combat trial. The trial would involve Da Min facing 3 of the academy's elite fighters simultaneously. The winner would be determined by combat skill alone, with no simulation technology or safety controls. This was not just a training exercise. This was a test of supremacy, and everyone understood it. The announcement shocked Taio. He knew that some of the senior commanders had been uncomfortable with Da Min's presence at the academy, but he had not expected such an obvious and public challenge. A trial like this was meant to prove something to the entire academy. Commander Rohan was giving Da Min a choice. She could either accept the challenge and prove human worth in combat, or refuse and admit that humans were not strong enough to stand among the galactic elite. Taio went immediately to find Da Min. He found her in the training chamber, doing a series of movements that looked like a dance but was actually a form of physical training. She moved from position to position with perfect control and grace. "Did you hear about Rohan's challenge?" Taio asked. "Yes," Da Min replied, continuing her movements without stopping. "I was expecting something like this." "You were expecting it?" Taio felt shocked. "Why did you not tell me?" "Because you would have worried, and worry clouds judgment," Da Min said. She completed her final movement and turned to face him. "Besides, this was always going to happen. There will always be those who refuse to accept something different. Rohan is not a bad man. He is just afraid. Fear makes people do things that seem like strength but are really just desperation." "Will you accept the challenge?" Taio asked. "Yes," Da Min said simply. "The trial is in 3 days. I have some preparation to do." For the next 3 days, the academy was filled with tension. Warriors gathered in groups to discuss the trial. Many seemed certain that Da Min would lose. She was facing 3 elite fighters, all trained in advanced combat techniques, all stronger and larger than her. How could any human, no matter how skilled, stand against such odds? But others, including Ji-won and several trainees who had seen Taio's training, believed that Da Min would find a way to win. They had seen her move, had felt her speed and understanding. They had learned that strength was not always what it seemed to be. The day of the trial arrived. The main combat arena was packed with warriors and instructors from every part of the academy. Commander Rohan stood at the highest position, watching everything with an expression of cold confidence. He had chosen his 3 fighters carefully. They were champions, each one known for a different strength. One was the fastest. One was the strongest. One was the most experienced. Da Min walked into the arena alone, wearing only simple training clothes. She looked small and fragile compared to her 3 opponents. The crowd seemed to sense that something significant was about to happen. Everyone fell silent. The trial began, and the 3 fighters attacked immediately. They moved together, trying to overwhelm her with numbers and speed. But Da Min did not try to fight them as a group. Instead, she focused on the fastest fighter first, moving in perfect response to his movements. When he attacked left, she was already moving right. When he attacked high, she was already low. She was not faster than him, but she seemed to know where he would be before he got there. The fastest fighter became frustrated. His attacks had always worked before, but against Da Min, his speed was useless. In his confusion, he made a mistake, overcommitting his balance. Da Min used this moment to push him to the ground, where he stayed, too dizzy and exhausted to return to the fight. Now 2 fighters remained. They changed their strategy, attacking more carefully, testing her defenses. But Da-min had studied them as well. She had watched them train for weeks. She had memorized their favorite techniques, their patterns, their weaknesses. Every move they made was something she had seen before and had prepared for. The strongest fighter tried to use his power to overwhelm her. But Da-min did not meet his strength. Instead, she redirected it, using his own force to throw him off balance. She moved around him like water flows around a stone, always present, but never where he expected. Eventually, his strength became a burden. His muscles grew tired from being used against him. His breathing became heavy. When the strongest fighter was exhausted, Da-min moved to the third. This one was the most experienced, and he fought more intelligently, trying to anticipate her movements instead of just reacting to them. This fight lasted longer than the others. They moved across the entire arena, each one trying to predict what the other would do. But in the end, Da-min's deeper understanding won. She knew his experience, had studied the thousands of fights he had fought before. She had learned his instincts and moved in the opposite direction. The trial ended with all 3 elite fighters on the ground, breathing heavily, unable to continue. Da-min stood in the center of the arena without a single scratch or sign of exhaustion. She was barely even breathing hard. What happened next was something no one had expected. Da-min walked over to each of the 3 fighters and offered them her hand, helping them stand up. Her expression was not proud or victorious. It was kind and respectful. "You fought well," Da-min said to each of them. "Each of you showed excellent technique and courage. You lost today not because you lack ability, but because you were fighting in a way you had not practiced. Now you know that there is more to master. Now you can fight smarter." The 3 fighters looked surprised by her words. They had expected anger or mockery. Instead, they received respect and encouragement. One of them, the strongest fighter, actually nodded with understanding. He had learned something important, not just about combat, but about what true strength looked like. Commander Rohan's expression had changed completely. His certainty had become shock. The outcome he had planned for had not happened. The human woman he had expected to see defeated had proven herself superior to his best fighters. And perhaps most importantly, she had shown that humans did not fight out of hatred or a desire to prove superiority, but from a genuine desire to learn and improve. Teo watched from the stands, feeling something shift in the entire academy. Something fundamental had changed. The question was no longer whether humans deserved to be at the academy. The question was what the academy would do with this new knowledge. The days following Da-min's trial were the most intense and important days in the academy's history. Something had shifted in the minds of everyone who had watched that combat. Da-min had not just won a trial. She had forced every warrior and instructor to reconsider what they believed about strength, about ability, and about what humans truly were. The first act of change came from Teo himself. 3 days after the trial, he requested a private meeting with the Academy's Command Council. This was unusual. Young trainees did not typically meet with the highest leaders of the Academy, but his request was approved, perhaps because everyone was curious about what a trainee might say after the shocking events of the trial. Teo stood before the council, feeling nervous but certain about what he needed to do. The council consisted of representatives from different species, including Commander Rohan, Instructor Mi-sun, and other powerful figures. They watched him with expressions that ranged from curious to suspicious. "I am here to ask that the Academy officially recognize the value of human learning and culture," Teo said, his voice steady and clear. "I request that humans be included equally in all academy programs and that we begin training with human instructors, not just human trainees. I believe that humans have something important to teach us, not just about combat, but about how to think and approach problems." The council members looked at each other with surprise. This was a bold request from a young trainee, but Teo continued, speaking with the confidence he had learned from watching Damin operate. I have learned from Damin that strength is not something you are born with. Strength is something you develop through learning and determination. The Academy teaches that some species are naturally stronger and some are naturally weaker, but humans have proven that with enough will and intelligence, they can overcome any natural limitation. If we do not learn from this, we will be left behind while other civilizations adapt and grow. Commander Rohan spoke first after Teo finished. Everyone expected him to reject the request, but instead, he nodded slowly. The trainee is correct, Rohan said. I challenged Damin because I did not believe humans deserved respect in our ranks. But I was wrong. She defeated my 3 best fighters not through luck or hidden technology, but through better understanding and preparation. That is a lesson the Academy needs to learn. If our opponents can learn to fight smarter, then we must learn to think better as well. Instructor Mi-sun supported Tayo's request without hesitation. She had been planning this moment for a long time, she explained. She had brought Damin to the Academy specifically to show young warriors that strength and power came from many sources. The Academy had been too focused on natural ability and not enough on development and learning. Within a week, the Council made an official decision. The Academy would establish a new program called the Exchange of Knowledge. Humans would serve as instructors in philosophy, strategy, and problem-solving. Alien species would share their own knowledge in return. The goal was to create warriors and thinkers who understood that strength came from many sources and that learning was never complete. Damin was offered a permanent position as a senior instructor. She accepted with a quiet smile, understanding that this was far more than just a job. This was a symbol of change, not just for the Academy, but for the entire galactic system. Teo found himself at the center of this transformation. Because he had been brave enough to speak up, other trainees from different species began asking questions about what they had been taught. Why did some species have lower status? Why were humans kept at the edges of galactic society? Why did the councils insist that some beings were naturally inferior? Jiwan became one of Teo's strongest allies in pushing for change. He had experienced Damin's teaching personally and believed deeply in what it represented. Together, they began organizing study groups where trainees could learn from both human and alien instructors. The groups became popular throughout the Academy. Word of the changes at the Academy reached the higher levels of galactic government. The Council of Worlds, the organization that ruled over all major species, began to discuss what was happening. Some members wanted the Academy changes stopped immediately. They said it was dangerous to give humans too much recognition. They said it would upset the balance that had existed for thousands of years. But other council members who had been secretly hoping for change used the Academy's success to support their own arguments. They presented evidence that human integration could bring benefits to all species. They showed how humans had already created new technologies and new ways of thinking that helped everyone. They argued that oppressing a species as capable as humans was not only morally wrong, but also practically dangerous. A species that was suppressed and limited would eventually become unstable and angry. The debate in the Council of Worlds became intense. Some ambassadors argued for removing humans from the Academy entirely. Others argued for full integration into all levels of galactic society. And some, taking the middle path, suggested that humans should be recognized as equals but given time to adjust to their new role. Months passed, and the Council made its historic decision. Humans would be recognized as full members of galactic civilization, with representation in all major institutions, including the Council of Worlds itself. Earth would be granted full planetary status, with all the rights and responsibilities that came with such recognition. Human training programs would expand, and humans would be included in all military, scientific, and diplomatic positions. The announcement shocked many worlds, but it also excited others. A new era was beginning, and nobody could predict exactly where it would lead. In the academy, the changes were immediate and visible. Humans and aliens trained together, not as masters and students, but as equals working toward common goals. The training became harder and more interesting because both groups were learning from each other. Humans taught strategy and adaptation. Aliens taught their own forms of power and discipline. Together they were creating something new. Tayo stood in the observation deck one evening, watching the stars as he often did. But this time, Damen stood beside him. They did not speak for a long time. They simply watched the endless darkness filled with distant lights. "Do you remember your first test?" Damen finally asked. "I remember failing," Tayo replied. "You did not fail," Damen said gently. "You began to learn. That was the entire point. That moment when I caught your bolt was not meant to show you that you were weak. It was meant to show you that there was so much more to discover. Not just about combat, but about yourself." Tayo nodded. He understood now. That moment in the testing arena, when his scanner bolt disappeared into Damen's hand, had been the beginning of everything. It was the moment when a young warrior realized that the universe was far larger and more complex than he had ever imagined. And it was the moment when he decided to stop assuming and start learning. The stars seemed to shine brighter than ever before, and Tayo felt at peace. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of possibilities, and that was enough.